Let's kick things off with Conor Khabib. A lot of moving parts here, BC, so help us understand what's going on here. Let's start with because there's actually a lot of other people in the orbit, but let's start with just those two. Conor and Khabib, we start with the Conor side of things. Excuse me, the Khabib side of things first. He spoke to ESPN's Brett Okamoto, and Brett was like, is this thing between you and Conor done? Because Dana White said that you two were going to host the coaches on The Ultimate Fighter, and your comments sort of scuttled that, or Conor's comments and behavior had scuttled that, excuse me. And he said, look, they could give me the UFC. They could give me $5 billion. I ain't fighting this chump. BC, is it time to give up on Khabib Conor 2?
Not yet. Okay, look, Khabib is a man of his principles. If he says things like, I may retire after this April fight, I don't ever want to, this, as he said, this guy's shit, I don't want to be near a pile of shit. You can smell. Very true statement there. Been around a lot of shit in my life. I will say I believe him in those regards, Luke. But I think there's still that glimmer of hope from the idea of what happens to Conor next. And it's very much fueled by a very obvious reason. Conor Khabib 2, provided one or both brands is not damaged from the standpoint of taking a big loss before that and not being able to recover from that big loss, remains the biggest fight you can make in all of MMA. I mean, it really is, Luke, okay? I don't know, can we do Joe Rogan against Logan Paul's mom? Yeah, maybe we might get more crossover eyes, but it's the biggest freaking fight you can make, the only one that, with the right promotion could go to 3 million pay-per-view buys potentially. It's astronomical, so you can never count it out, but I do think it comes down to where Conor goes next and what happens. And, that's a simple straight up. If he fights Dustin Poirier, and if he beats Dustin Poirier, I'm sorry. It's going to be hard to keep him out of a Khabib fight when you're talking about a potential April send-off next year, or maybe, Khabib decides to do 2 more next year, whatever. I know he wants GSP. It's just going to be hard because, Luke, not only do you have the financial realities of that, knowing UFC, knowing what this means for them, but also, Conor leaps right back into the frickin' title mix if he beats Dustin Poirier. There's really, arguably, no other bigger win he could get outside of Gaethje or Khabib, who are going to be fighting each other, of course, to get himself right there. So I think the soundbite we got there from Brett, and by the way, Ioana was right. Brett is the best-looking journalist in mixed martial arts. It's more about the Ultimate Fighter. That does nothing for Khabib. That I back him in saying there's no, you could do anything to me. You know what I'm saying? You can give me an AIDS sandwich and I'd say, where do I put the ketchup on it? I get it. That's a vehicle that exposes what Conor does best. Talk trash, talk bad about him. Khabib wants nothing to do with that. I respect that. I'm not going to say, Luke, that the door is closed just given his hatred, because if Conor beats Dustin, who else you going to put in there? Even the great Tony Ferguson wouldn't have an available name that I think would allow him to leapfrog if Conor fights and beats Poirier.
Yeah, I think that's right. The key here is what Conor does next. And if he ends up taking the Poirier fight, and we'll talk about some of the mechanics of what's happening there in just a second, but you're right, BC, if he takes it, and it's competitive, but he wins, and he wins emphatically, and we all know if Conor has one gift, he's got many of them, but if he's got one real gift, it's not just the gift of gab. It's how to define the future when someone puts a microphone in his face. People always ask you, what do you want next? What do you want next to the winning fighter? When they do that for him, he has a way of just shaping reality. And if he got on there and made the compelling case in the way that I think we assume he could if he wanted to, that, hey, listen, Khabib, it's time. You got to do it. You can run and hide, blah, 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 blah. It's time. I've earned it. I beat Cerrone. I just beat Poirier. And again, the Poirier win would be the more significant of those two by a country mile. But still, the 2 wins together in 2020. You can't say no to me anymore, especially given all the availabilities or lack thereof, or, Tony coming off of a loss. And so at that point, it puts a renewed pressure on him. The Ultimate Fighter can't really pressure Khabib because, one, he could just say no outright, which he can say anyway, but the problem with the Ultimate Fighter is, one, it delays the fights, and how much does he want to just sit on the shelf to make a TV show? And two, it's totally superfluous. It is absolutely just entertainment for entertainment's sake. It doesn't mean anything other than driving up sales for the UFC, which Conor and Khabib can both say, fellas, got news for you. We don't need the Ultimate Fighter to sell this one. It might help in some kind of way, but we certainly do not need it.
We got a
right?
dolly and a bus window that we already used, and it's just sold for life, Luke.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So, like, I get why the UFC would want it, because BC, there was an article that came out on ESPN talking about how much the regional scene has been devastated by the coronavirus in terms of the number of shows that can get out there. The Ultimate Fighter doesn't solve that, but you can see the UFC is leaning into Contender Series and maybe bringing Tough back as a way to kind of like jumpstart who's available to get that sort of conveyor belt of new talent in. So I'm with Khabib in the sense that, and you in the sense that it's not done. It's done for right now, unless Conor can just really find undeniable leverage to make this happen. Which leads us, BC, to the sort of second part of this conversation, which is Conor got on Twitter and confirmed that he wanted the Poirier fight next, but they were working out some of the details that went to make it happen, because he wanted a southpaw in Poirier before fighting a southpaw in Pacquiao. Now, what do you make of that?
I make of that as just in a double down publicly, or at least this is what I hope, Luke. I'm not going to pretend I know what Conor McGregor's ever thinking, right? I mean, he's a genius in a lot of ways. He's also, he's pretty crazy, too. On top of that, he's notoriously crazy. I would love to believe that because, Kevin Iole came out a week and a half ago and said, hey, oh, by the way, Manny Pacquiao told me he doesn't actually have a deal with Paradigm Sports, Conor's management team. And then we happened to see this week a picture on Twitter of Manny holding up the contract. So now he is. I don't know what the disconnect was. Would I understand that Conor would want this fight? Yes, of course, 100%. There's so much money to be made. It's a real challenge for himself against a legendary boxer. I just don't think you ever do that, Luke, when you're in the midst of something. And if he's going to fight Dustin Poirier, he's going to be in the midst of trying to regain the mountaintop he once had in the UFC's lightweight division, to try to get back there and run back what was, his most embarrassing defeat. Look, I know the Nate Diaz first fight at 196 was a bit embarrassing because he gassed out and all that, but he redeemed that. There's a lot of self-embarrassment deep inside, knowing the competitor he is, on how uncompetitive he was with Khabib. So I'm going to hope that this is just him publicizing his new stablemate in Pacquiao, saying, yeah, of course I would love to fight this guy, and just using that as a double down to say, hey, UFC, just so you know, I'm not going to take any kind of money you think I'm going to take. I am going to still be calling the shots here, and yes, I can go do this side thing at any time if I want. Because, Luke, why would you ever agree when you're in Conor's position, meaning you can take any fight you want seemingly at any time, right? Short of a title shot if that guy's already taken. Why would you agree to go back down the competitive route and fight Poirier? I know we knocked him out, but we've talked about it already. I mean, the new Poirier is like the toughest fight you could make right now, with Tony coming off a loss at lightweight and Justin already being in the title shot. So, no, it doesn't do anything to me to believe that he would take that boxing match. Luke, try to tell me a reason why he would. He doesn't need the money. He has nothing to prove. He already did a pro boxing match, and I know, he lost pretty badly in the end, but he was fairly competitive. He didn't embarrass himself. If anything, I was impressed, to be straight up honest with you, that he was able to handle himself for as long as Floyd let him. Tell me a reason why he would do this outside of control.
See, this is where I can't decide what's happening, and maybe you can clarify it for me. I want to be very clear about what I'm about to say. I am not comparing the two things as total equals. In fact, far from it. What I'm about to say is they have too many similarities for me to ignore, but too many differences for them to be all that alike. And here's what I mean. What is really the difference between what CM Punk did in the UFC and what Conor is trying at the high end of boxing? And this is the reason why I make this analogy to a degree, which is when people defended what CM Punk was doing, and I'm trying to have an honest conversation here, I'm not trying to be demeaning, but they were saying, you have to respect someone who gets in there. It's very, very difficult. He trains really hard, all of which I'm certain is totally true. But if you really wanted to get good at MMA and compete at it, you cannot start at that level against Mickey Gall or, frankly, even against Mike Jackson. You need to start on an amateur circuit, or at least a low-level pro circuit, and you have to work your way up. You have to go to grappling tournaments. You have to do whatever you can do to get as much requisite experience. And then what you learn is, through that incremental tiered system, you learn about your mistakes, your weaknesses, and you iron them out. And if you're good enough, you can progress up the food chain to get to a point where You can really test it against people that are, if not elite, in the case of CM Punk, maybe great him on a curve, but, very good. High-level regional fighters, the Mickey Gall type, who's UFC level on some degree, but you get the idea. But he didn't do that. He cut to the front of the line and had this appearance where it was like, I'm going to take on a challenge that I just can't match, get paid good money for it, and people are just going to say I trained hard and I worked hard. Guys, every MMA gym I've ever been in and boxing gym I've ever been in was full of people who trained their ass off, and they didn't really get any credit for it because it's what you're supposed to do. Like, you don't get credit for doing the things that are just given. On the end of Conor,
by the way, you sound like Chris Rock there. I take care of my kids.
Yeah, I didn't
That's
mean
what you're supposed to do.
I mean, yes, getting in there is something I've never done, so I have to tip my hat to CM Punk in that way, and I mean that sincerely. At the same time, taking overmatched challenges against things you can't possibly live up to for huge sums of money, that doesn't tell me you actually want to get good at fighting. And it's the same thing with boxing. It's like, on the one hand, BC, you asked why would he want the Pacquiao fight? He's already wealthy. Well, I sort of believe Conor, when he was saying, I don't mind getting out of my comfort zone and testing myself when he fought Floyd, I kind of believe that, to be quite honest with you. There is something to be said about MMA fighters going to jiu-jitsu tournaments and everything else and trying things where they're overmatched and just seeing what happens. On the other hand, BC, I get a little bit of the CM Punk vibe, which is to say, dude, if you really wanted to get good at boxing, you wouldn't be fighting Floyd in your opening debut. You wouldn't be fighting Pacquiao for huge amounts of money because you're probably not going to win either of those. You're going to get paid handsomely, and you're actually not going to get better at boxing that way. So which is it, BC?
Again, I hope it's leverage. I hope it's pressure. And that doesn't mean, if it is leverage and pressure, it doesn't mean, I think he still wants to fight Pacquiao for all the reasons you just said. And I think it also would make sense under the Paradigm Sports management household, right? When you're drinking whiskey there with Audie, it would probably make a lot of sense for them to put all their big brands together. It's just, double down what I said. It's like, you're on the path again for that lightweight title. You're on the path for that Khabib rematch, which is all you have friggin' talked about. And one more thing on Khabib, though, Luke. The idea of would he take a Conor rematch? Forget the Ultimate Fighter, but would he take a Conor rematch? Remember what he did say, I think 3 months ago, the last time he was publicly asked about would you fight Conor? Would he be in the running for your April retirement bout if that retirement plan is still a thing? Luke, you remember what he said? If he beats Dustin Poirier, he said, in fact, whoever beats Dustin Poirier, a guy who Khabib respects, who he deemed at the time as, the number one contender separate from Justin Gaethje, if he beats him, Khabib, I'm sorry, you're going to have to take that fight or retire.
Yeah, also, the weird thing about Khabib is, like, if you don't want to fight Conor because you think he hasn't earned it, and I would agree, beating Cerrone is not sufficient. You got to beat Poirier. But let's say he goes in there and he beats Poirier in whatever that means, convincing way. Then, again, Khabib kind of has to pay the piper at that point, even if he is the champion. However, when he makes these comments about Conor being, like, low class or low quality or, character missing. It's like, I don't know what the situation is that makes him or compels him to want to buddy up to, Ramzan Kadyrov and various other figures of ill repute. I don't know what that is. There could be a lot of politics involved there, self-preservation. I don't know. No one really knows what the answer is, and we'll probably never get one. But your argument for how weak Conor is in terms of his moral, centering, it falls apart. You can't make that one. You want to make any other argument about worthiness, or you just don't like the guy. Fuck the guy. You just don't like him. Fine, I'll buy it. But you got pictures on Instagram with Kadyrov. Hold your horses a little bit on, who the guy is that deserves to have his character examined.
I mean, I guess that's fair, but everybody's got good and bad in them, Luke. Even you. I'd be remiss if I didn't go back to the well, though, Luke. Was Joanna right what she said about bread? And that is no disrespect to people like Laura Sanko, John Morgan in the blue shirt. Is Joanna correct?
Certainly, I wouldn't challenge it, but it's not a question I've thought deeply about. I'll put it that way, BC. And you bring it up, by the way, an uncomfortable amount of times. I just want to point that out.
It's my guy, all right? Come on, it's my guy.
TV taught me how to dream. It was a life jacket. I don't think you can be an artist and not touch people.